In the name of God, the most gracious, the most merciful, the 23rd Gleam, the Treatise on Nature. It was originally the 16th note of the 17th Gleam, but because of its importance, it became the 23rd Gleam. It was the 16th note of the 17th Gleam, but because of its importance, it became the 23rd Gleam. So this means that in the treatises, the topics and their placement aren't just random, right? They're placed and positioned according to their importance. It kills the idea of disbelief that comes from nature in a way that it can never be resurrected. It completely shatters the cornerstone of disbelief. Where does the importance of the treatise on nature come from? It kills the idea of disbelief that comes from nature in a way that it can never be resurrected. It completely shatters the cornerstone of disbelief. For example, we say God does everything, God creates everything, we attribute everything to God. Because God has power, He has knowledge, it's perfectly rational to attribute it to God, but they attribute it to nature. However, since nature has none of the qualities needed to make or create this universe, the Master shows here in this treatise that it's impossible. So by demonstrating that attributing things to nature is wrong, he kills that idea. Once you clearly reveal what nature truly is, and a person understands that nature cannot create this universe or any work of art within creation, the idea of disbelief dies right there. It kills the idea of disbelief that comes from nature in a way that it can never be resurrected. It completely shatters the cornerstone of disbelief. What is the cornerstone of disbelief? It's nature, it's matter. Our Master shatters it at that point by revealing that matter and nature have no quality of influence or creation, right? Yes, shatters. To use an analogy, it's like when you hit a stone with a huge sledgehammer and it just turns to dust, right? There's no stone left. He just smashes it to smithereens. Of course, he also completely smashes the philosophy of nature here. He hands everything over directly to God Almighty. It's very important in this respect. Even as people of faith, we studied in these schools, we read these science books. The idea of godlessness has seeped into science books, and from within those science books, it has infected all people of faith, hasn't it? More or less everyone has been wounded by this. And we, by reading the RİSALE-İ, thank God we have cleaned out this false part within those sciences, praise be to God. But the truthful part of science is still God's art. I have nothing to say against that. So here, how far from reason, how ugly, and to what degree of superstition the path taken by the naturalist deniers is. The naturalist deniers. This means that among naturalists, there are those who both attribute power to nature and also believe in God. Here, it's more about the ones who deny God, how far from reason, how ugly, and to what degree of superstition the path taken by the naturalist deniers is. For example, when you say nature does it, you don't really get anything from that phrase. But when you delve into it, what does nature does it really mean? You're attributing creation, you're attributing influence to nature. Then you're giving it divinity. Well, what is this thing we call nature? Can it accept such divinity? Would reason accept this? He shows how far from reason it is, then how ugly it is. Ugliness, for example, something is ugly when it's disharmonious, right? For instance, beauty comes from proportion. If the limbs and organs are in harmony with each other, there's beauty. But if they're disharmonious, their place, shape, size, it's ugly. Here too, as an idea, it doesn't align with the realities of the universe. For instance, the beings in the universe are extremely artistic, while nature is mindless and unconscious. You just can't make a mindless, unconscious thing harmonize with something so artistic. So the philosophy of naturalism becomes ugly because it lacks harmony. How ugly and to what degree of superstition it is. Superstitions are unreal. Things that have no counterpart in the universe are called superstitions. So these ideas have absolutely no counterpart in the universe. They are superstitious ideas that people have completely made up in their own heads. What kind of superstition is it? It's explained with 9 absurdities that encompass at least 90 impossibilities. I mean, an absurdity is something that is logically wrong. If I were to say, for example, this knife made this whole meal, that this knife chopped everything and did it all, you'd look and say, it's mindless, unconscious, a lifeless thing. How could it do that? You'd say it's ridiculous, right away, wouldn't you? You'd immediately see it couldn't do it and call it nonsense. Here too, he will show that attributing things to chance, nature, or causes is completely nonsensical. But because it's presented to us all dressed up and fancy, people can be fooled. Here, he exposes all its faults, explained with 9 absurdities that encompass 90 impossibilities. Since those absurdities are partially explained in other treatises, like in the Mesnevi-i Nuriye, then in the Treatise of the Droplet, in the later parts of the Mesnevi, and in many other places in the collection, there are many parts with this meaning. Therefore, he says, due to its very concise nature here, some steps have been skipped. For example, in the 30th word, there are very beautiful discussions about atoms. He's explained it in more detail there, for instance. Of course, when you read it and look at those parts too, when you look at the whole collection, it becomes completely clear. Now, it wouldn't work if he explained here in detail what he already explained at length elsewhere. He covers those points briefly here, because they are mentioned in those other places. That's why the thought comes to mind. How could these famous rational philosophers accept such a self-evident and obvious superstition and follow that path? Now, when you claim an idea is this false and this far from reason, a question like that comes to mind. I mean, if the philosophy of naturalism is so far from reason, then why do these famous rational philosophers, the ones we call the world's brilliant thinkers, accept these ideas? Don't they see the falsehood within these ideas? Being smart, they should have seen it. So how can they accept it? That's what comes to mind. That's why the thought comes to mind. How could these famous rational philosophers accept such a self-evident and obvious superstition and follow that path? Yes, the answer is very meaningful. Yes, they have not been able to see the inner face of their path. So a path has an inner face and an outer face. Let me say something funny. A brother says, it happens by itself, with the power of God, for example. Now, when you analyze that sentence, I mean, can you have two of those things in the same sentence? If it's happening by God's power, it's not happening by itself. If it's happening by itself, then it's not by God's power. Look, it's used in the same sentence, and if you don't think about it, there's no problem. But the moment you think, what is this sentence trying to say? Let me think about its content. You see, it holds two completely opposite things. It's just like that. When you say, nature does it, Mother Nature gives it, or whatever, if you look at it superficially, there's no problem. But when you reflect on it, for example, this happens on its own, like we said before. If we say this building is coming into being on its own, it means no one is involved. No one is intervening from the outside. It means the building's stones, soil, iron, cement, doors, and windows. The bricks themselves are going and lining themselves up, forming a wall. That's what on its own means. Could such a thing be possible? Well, if you say such a thing is happening, then all those bricks must be intelligent, conscious. They must know how to build a house. They wanted to become a house. they've all agreed with each other, and so on. They must have these kinds of qualities then. If you're saying it happens on its own, then you must be saying that these bricks, these stones are acting intelligently, consciously, and with awareness. Is there consciousness in a brick? No. But the idea you're stating necessitates accepting this as a consequence. If you can't accept this, if you won't accept that a stone or brick is intelligent and conscious, then you can't say it happens on its own either. You know, there's that rule. If a thing is established, it is established with all its necessary implications. So here, he lays out the implications of statements like nature does it, or it happens on its own. When the implication is an absurdity, the idea itself becomes an absurdity, so they haven't thought about these implications. When I say, it just becomes, or the laws do it, they haven't seen what that necessitates, and because of that, they couldn't see how absurd their idea was. But here, because he lays out the implications, he shows how wrong the inner face of it is, what it requires, and that those required things have no counterpart in the universe, that they don't align with the universe. Once he shows that, the matter is settled. Besides, there's also this. The people we call scientists aren't concerned with this side of things anyway. For example, if a man is doing scientific research, he's dealing with the art that God has placed in things, the relationships between the power of things. He's not researching how these things happen or what their true cause is. He's researching the order, the system there. So they're not even looking in that direction. Maybe if they looked, they would see it too. I mean, it's not their field anyway. So, in conclusion, they haven't seen the inner face of their paths. And when it is shown through works like the RİSALE-İ, there are indeed many people of faith who abandon that idea of disbelief and come to faith, right? For instance, one reason the RİSALE-İ has flourished in university circles is this. People who deal with science, for example, see the art in things. Then, when they see in the RİSALE-İ that it cannot be explained by nature, chance, or laws, and when they also see the artistry there, they immediately understand that the true owner is God. And so, many Nur students who are in university or doing more academic work gain a verified faith. In the past, for example, before the RİSALE-İ, those who went away to study would come back as atheists in the old days, a long, long time ago. But those who encounter the RİSALE-İ come back even more religious, right? Yes, but that's another topic. Yes, they have not been able to see the inner face of their path and the reality of their path, and what their path necessitates and requires is this. At the end of each written absurdity, I mean, nature does it. It happens on its own. Causes do it. What is the reality of this path? This is laid out. Then its implications are laid out. And then the reality of those who accept those implications is laid out. So the issue becomes perfectly clear. In fact, when he says, you will either accept a God with knowledge and power, or you will have to give divinity to every single atom. For example, it becomes clear how wrong it is to attribute things to causes or atoms. What kind of person accepts something so wrong? This means they don't have even an atom's worth of sense. And then, well, the expressions get a bit ugly, repulsive, and irrational, but they've earned it. And he's going to explain all of that. And the reality of their path and what their path necessitates and requires is this. The ugly, repulsive, and irrational footnote stated at the end of each written absurdity. The reason this treatise was written is that the truths of faith were being ridiculed in a very aggressive and ugly manner, and things that their corrupted minds couldn't grasp were being called superstition, and atheism was being tied to nature in an attack on the Quran. Yes, why was this treatise written? in a very aggressive and very ugly manner. I mean, they're attacking. The man is attacking people of faith, mocking people of faith. Then, he doesn't just say, I don't believe, and sit quietly on his own. He attacks people of faith. He tries to harm other people's faith. If he's a great man, he naturally has to say stop to them, right? He has to go on the defensive. Because of this, by belittling the truths of faith, calling things their corrupted minds couldn't grasp superstition, he doesn't say, I can't understand it. He calls it superstition. But it's his own corrupted mind that can't grasp it. Calling things their corrupted minds couldn't grasp superstition, and tying atheism to nature in an attack on the Quran. That attack gave such a fierce indignation to the heart and pen that it delivered severe and harsh slaps to those deniers and to those false schools of thought that turned their backs on the truth. Like you were saying, Serhan Effendi, for instance, among unbelievers, some accept non-existence, some accept, and then there are those who make atheism a mission and try to spread it and so on in levels. To those who are on the attack, that attack gave a fierce indignation to the heart and pen. When they attack the truths you believe in, the master, of course, has an extraordinary sense of honor. Indignation comes to his heart, and that is reflected in his pen, right? It gave to the heart and pen such that it delivered severe and harsh slaps. A harsh slap, for example, when you hit someone, and then there's one that you really plant on them, like an Ottoman slap. That's called a harsh slap. I mean, more severe, and with the anger of, how could you do such a thing? It delivered severe and harsh slaps to those polytheists and those false schools of thought that turn their backs on the truth. Otherwise, the way of the RİSALE-İ Nur is refined, gentle, and uses soft words. For example, some nicknames have been given in history to such aggressors. Abu Lahab, Abu Jahl. Huh? Musaylima the liar. I mean, because they deserved it? Of course. Because they were just so aggressive. So, for example, the path of the Risal, in the entire collection, these kinds of expressions are only found in the treatise on nature. If a donkey were to become a double donkey and then a human, he would say, I wouldn't accept this idea, and run away. Or, for every one of your atoms that doesn't have an atom's worth of sense, you'd have to give it the intellect of 1,000 Platos. At the end of every absurdity, there's always an expression like this. This is exclusive to this treatise, because what is the way of the RİSALE-İ Nur? Refined, gentle, with soft words. Because truths are beautiful, and beautiful truths must be expressed beautifully. But here, this style was used only to put these men of this type, in their place, to expose their errors like this. If you don't want to be subjected to these expressions, then don't join that class. Like I said a moment ago, for instance, they gave the book, the Treatise on Nature, to a philosophy professor. He said the Treatise on Nature was excellent. He said, it answers all the philosophies of godlessness in the world, but it would have been better without these expressions. They say, Professor, look, there's a footnote here. These expressions are only for the aggressive ones. Okay, he said, that makes sense now. He said, I thought it was about me. I was very hurt. They said, no, Professor, it's not directed at you. They gave it to a professor at Métier. In summary, I am ready to explain and prove in detail, with extremely self-evident and decisive proofs, to anyone who has doubts, that this is the summary of their school of thought and the necessary and inevitable requirement of their path. In the name of God, the most gracious, the most merciful. For example, you see the sun. The sun's light has filled the entire day. It reflects on the entire surface of the sea. You feel its warmth. It has so many manifestations, signs, indicators, and effects. With the sun in this state, can the sun be denied? Can there be any doubt about the sun? How ridiculous would that be? I mean, God's existence, his names and attributes have encompassed the universe. They have brought the universe into being. With so many effects, can there be any doubt about God when there are so many creatures and beings whose existence proves his creative existence? Even when you can't see him with your eyes, can one fall into doubt and wonder if he exists or not? That's what the verse is asking. This noble verse, with its rhetorical question of negation, I mean, it belittles the act of denial. For example, a man walks into the living room with his slippers on, or his shoes. You say, "Do you really wear shoes in here? What are you doing to him?" You're pointing out his mistake. Look, how can you make such a mistake? And you're also belittling that action of his. I mean, can there be any doubt or uncertainty about God? Is your head not working at all? There's a belittling tone, as if asking, can't your mind grasp it? It's not really a question for him. This noble verse, with its rhetorical question of negation, by saying that there is not and should not be any doubt about God Almighty. If there are various kinds of whispers and doubts that have somehow entered, of course, after all, we studied in schools. I mean, the philosophies of godlessness from Europe entered into the sciences and came to us that way. For example, a man inserts the theory of evolution into books, brings it to you in biology textbooks. You think it's something scientific. You think all of science accepts it. There's no such thing. It's in the name, it's just a theory. It hasn't been proven. A theory is a theory. If it were proven, it would become a law or something. But they present the theory as if it were a fact. So when you read those things, and things like laws doing the work, you say the planets are revolving, and you think, well, there's Kepler's law, or what have you. You say, the laws are making them revolve. Because these kinds of things have entered our subconscious, there might be some doubt of atheism. But when the treatise on nature is read seriously from beginning to end, one by one, and when we see how those absurdities correspond to the created beings, it gives a lesson that leaves no trace of doubt or uncertainty, if one can say that. That's what he's saying, right? That's why citing this verse at the beginning is so meaningful in that respect. He is also proving that this verse is right, that there really shouldn't be any doubt or uncertainty. By saying there is not and should not be any doubt about God Almighty, it shows that the existence and oneness of God, God's existence and his divine oneness, that God's authority is over the entire universe, is self-evident, a warning before explaining this secret. In the year 1338, I went to Ankara. I saw that a very dreadful idea of heresy was working insidiously to enter, corrupt, and poison the strong thoughts of the people of faith, who were joyful over the victory of the Islamic army against the Greeks. Yes, a very dreadful idea of heresy within the strong thoughts of the people of faith who were joyful. I mean, heresy is defeated materially, but this time it launches its attack again on the spiritual front. A very dreadful idea of heresy. I saw it was working insidiously to enter, corrupt, and poison. I said, alas, this dragon will attack the pillars of faith. Isn't it amazing how our Master saw that danger? I mean, to see that such an atheistic activity had started in a moment of joy. Yes, and in a moment of joy no less. Not everyone is joyful. When people are emotional, whether in times of fear or joy, reasoning takes a back seat. You don't think clearly. But the Master is alert. He notices it immediately. I said, alas, this dragon will attack the pillars of faith. At that time, since this noble verse explains God's existence and oneness to the degree of being self-evident. What does self-evident mean? What was self-evidence? Blatantly obvious. Blatantly obvious. For example, the sun's existence is self-evident. This table, for instance, is self-evident. I mean certainty. Is there any doubt? You see it, you touch it, you interact with it. I mean, it's like seeing God's existence. For example, Imam Ali, may God be pleased with him, had a saying. What was it? If the veil of the unseen were lifted, my certainty would not increase. If the veil of the unseen were lifted, meaning if I were to see God himself, my faith in God wouldn't increase. I mean, the veil is already lifted for him. It has reached the level of self-evidence. This means every person of faith, every Noor student among us, needs to reach this level of self-evidence. Right? At that time, since this noble verse explains God's existence and oneness to the degree of being self-evident, I sought help from it. I sought help from it and wrote in an Arabic treatise a powerful proof taken from the all-wise Quran, strong enough to smash the head of that heresy. For instance, these expressions are also very important. People say, for example, the Noor students only read the RİSALE, they don't read the Quran. As if the Quran is, God forbid, something less. Look what he says. I sought help from this noble verse. I mean, the RİSALE-İ Nur comes from the Quran. They are truths gathered from the garden of the Quran. These are the meanings expressed by the Quran. They're not some personal reflections of the Master. So when we read the RİSALE-İ Nur, what do we think we're reading? We think we are learning the truths of the Quran, which is why we read it day and night. That's how much we value it, right? And what will illuminate our inner selves is again those Quranic truths in the RİSALE-İ Nur. Otherwise, we can't attain this level of faith by ourselves. I mean, the more seriously we turn our attention to the RİSALE-İ Nur, to the truths hidden in its sentences, lines, and words, the more we turn our attention to them, the more we succeed in seeing the truths there, the more we will be enlightened. That's what we believe, right? So we too seek help from the RİSALE-İ Nur, because we see the RİSALE-İ Nur as the truths of the Quran. We don't see it as something different. In fact, in the Kastamonu addendum, doesn't he say? He says, while listening to the 22nd word, I saw universal remembrance, universal reflection, and abundant declarations of there is no God but God. That's why he says, reading the RİSALE-İ Nur is equivalent to a spiritual reflective reading of the Quran in the Barla addendum. Just as the Master seeks help from the Quran here and extracts these meanings, we must seek help from those meanings and illuminate our lives in this way. I mean, this is how we can be illuminated. Seeking help from it, I wrote in an Arabic treatise a powerful proof taken from the all-wise Quran, strong enough to smash the head of that heresy. I had it printed at the Yenigun press in Ankara. But unfortunately, few knew Arabic, and those who cared for security were also rare. Moreover, being very concise and brief, that powerful proof did not show its effect. Unfortunately, that idea of godlessness both developed and gained strength. Our Master put in so much effort at that time. He had it printed, this and that happened. Now we have the RİSALE-İ Nur in our hands. We have the treatise on nature. There are so many young people in schools here and there, right? Their minds are in 1,000 pieces. We need to get it to them. Unfortunately, that idea of godlessness both developed and gained strength. Out of necessity, I will explain that proof in Turkish to some extent. Since some parts of that proof are fully explained in some treatises, it will be written here in summary. The numerous proofs that are divided among other treatises are partially united in this proof. each one of them becomes a part of this one. So this warning shows that in this era, there is a great need for these faith-related discussions in the RİSALE-İ Nur, that the idea of godlessness has spread and is trying to spread, and that this treatise was written against it. The same meanings are valid today. God willing. Introduction. O man, know that there are dreadful words that come from people's mouths and imply godlessness. Words that come from people's mouths. Like I said earlier, a brother or someone was saying about a tree, it's happening on its own, with God's power. He says with God's power, out of his strong faith. He also learned it that way in school. What did he say? It's not clear. Or he says, I took this medicine and it got me back on my feet. What just happened? You attributed the effect to the medicine. The real effect belongs only to God Almighty. People unknowingly can attribute the effect to nature or chance, but when you analyze these words, they imply godlessness. This means even if they are people of faith, there's a deficiency in their level of awareness. Oh man, know that there are dreadful words that come from people's mouths and imply godlessness. Calling them dreadful is because, on the point of faith, any mistake is significant. Any small development in faith is very valuable, and any small mistake becomes very dreadful in turn. There are dreadful words that imply godlessness. People of faith use them unknowingly. Yes. I mean, we can find so many examples of this in our daily lives, right? The words we use. But people of faith use them unknowingly. We will explain three of the most important ones. The first is evçedetül esbab, meaning the causes created this thing. I mean, God Almighty, in accordance with his wisdom, creates within a system of cause and effect relationships in the universe. Everything has a cause. But what is that cause? It's apparent. It's a pretext. For instance, we pour water on a tree, right? That water is normally just a pretext. If we don't pour water, will God not create the tree, can't he? He can still create it, but he creates it when we pour the water. He has made it a condition, a pretext, that apparent cause should not be seen as the real cause. That is God's custom. I pour this water, and God still creates the tree. I mean, if one attributes it to the causes, it becomes cause worship. That's the first one. The first is evçedetül esbab, meaning the causes created this thing. The second is teşekkele bi nefsihi, meaning it forms by itself, it comes into being, it's done. For example, someone says, this flower bloomed on its own. What's happening? You are not seeing or thinking about the fact that it is God Almighty's name of the All-Beautiful that created that flower. That's wrong. It means there's a problem there. Is it something that can happen on its own? It's not, but people can use this phrase. Can an atom move without God's intervention, without the manifestation of God's power? It cannot. But when you say it this way, it implies a meaning as if it could happen without the manifestation of God's power. This is the second one. The second is teşekkele bi nefsihi, meaning it forms by itself, it comes into being, it's done. The third is iktazatu tabiat, meaning it is natural, nature requires and creates it. I mean, God has given certain properties to things, to matter, to nature. There are various arts. It's as if they have an effect, or there are various forces in things, forces that come into being with the manifestation of God Almighty's power. Those forces are a glimmer of his power. They are mistakenly thought to be in the things themselves. An influence is attributed to nature. Something like this. This has been expressed as the third word. Its absurdities will be discussed later anyway. The third, of course, is iktazatu tabiat, meaning it is natural, nature requires and creates it. Yes, since beings exist and cannot be denied, yes, this is where the topic begins. I mean, if we are going to read this topic with someone who is trying to deny God, this is the starting point, right? For example, if you want to reach a certain point with a person, you must first agree on a point you both have in common. You need to find a point that both you and they accept. Then slowly, you will move towards the goal. Here, yes, since beings exist and cannot be denied, I accept this. For example, does this tree exist? Yes. Does this sheep exist? Yes. Does this apple exist? Yes, right? You ask an atheist too. Brother, does the apple exist? Does the sheep exist? Yes. Does the fly exist? Yes. See, we've agreed. Is there a problem here? No, since beings exist and cannot be denied. But there are the sophists. They even deny the existence of beings. To them, you first have to say, first accept the existence of beings. Then we can talk. Yes, since beings exist and cannot be denied, and every being comes into existence artfully and wisely. Second question, when you look at this apple, this honeybee, this fly, this flower, this eye, is there art in it? Is there wisdom? Look, you see such perfection. It has purposes. It has benefits. I mean, it's not a useless, absurd thing. Whatever has been created definitely has a function. It has a purpose, a benefit, an art. Is this clear too? This is clear too. They have to accept this as well. And every being comes into existence artfully and wisely. And since it is not eternal, but newly created, for example, why does he say this? What if it were eternal? For example, if this apple had always existed since pre-eternity, could you ask, who created it? You couldn't. It has existed since pre-eternity. Therefore, it has to come into being later, so you can ask, who made this exist? Right? Now, since beings also come into existence later, for example, let's say this classroom of ours wasn't here last year. Let's say it is here now. There was no building here. You can investigate how this building came to be. I mean, if a work has appeared, you can contemplate it. How did this happen, brother? I mean, there was no building here. I came last year. There was no building here. Now there is. We need to find out how this happened. Did the wind blow by chance? This and that happened, and this building appeared. Did it happen on its own? Or did an architect and a contractor come and build it? There's a reality to it, right? We're investigating that. Therefore, the fact that beings are created later is important. For instance, the earth broke off from the sun, right? The Quran says it. Science says it. When the earth broke off, or was broken off, we should say, from the sun and came into being, what was on earth? A ball of fire, right? Now there are thousands, millions of types of plants and animals on it. There are wonderful arts. How did it get from that state to this state, right? This question needs to be asked. It needs to be explained. You read about the flies in winter. They weren't there in winter. Yes. Right now, flies have been created. Who created them? You know. Yes. I mean, we can go back to the very beginning. We can also look at the newly created apples every spring. A baby is being created in the mother's womb. A human is being created. Who is creating it? I mean, who created it right now? Why? A heart is being created. It's happening. How is it happening? Is it happening on its own? Is it happening by chance? Is nature doing it? Is it happening by God's power? We are investigating this right now. The Master makes a very, very logical introduction. Okay, we're investigating this right now. We're going to find the truth. And since it is not eternal, but newly created, then surely, O atheist, you must explain this being. We can contemplate the creation of a child in the mother's womb. From a drop of water, how does it reach a state equipped with so many wonderful organs? This being, for example, this animal, you will either say that the causes of the world create it, that air, water, and earth have combined to make this child or this tree, or you will say that it forms by itself, that no one, God forbid, interferes. They've just watched it and agreed among themselves. They are trying to create this art. Are you going to say that? Or that it comes into being as a requirement of nature, with the influence of nature. They've invented something called laws, nature, and it comes into being through its influence. Or it is created by the power of an all-powerful, majestic one. Since logically, there is no other way than these four. Logically, there is no other way than these four. If the first three ways are definitively proven to be impossible, null, untenable, and unfeasible, then by necessity and self-evidently, the fourth way, the path of oneness, will be established without a doubt or suspicion. For example, would an example like this work? Hassan Abi? Let's say there are 4 people in this house, or there's a person, there's an animal, there's a sofa, and what else? Let's say there's a tree, something. Then in the middle, there's a beautiful work of art. Let's say, what is there? A beautiful table. I don't know, a cabinet, a computer, something. This wasn't here. Then today it appeared. Now who made this? Well, who's in this house? There's an intelligent, conscious person. There's a disabled person who can't see, has no hands. I don't know, there's some crazy person. There's a door, a window. There are unrelated things. If you were to say, are we attributing intelligence to this sofa? How is it going to make this computer? Forget that. The other one, the sheep, goat, whatever. It has no intellect or consciousness. How is it going to make this computer? Forget that too. The other one, the wall. The wall can't even help itself. Here there's also, say, a computer engineer or something. Then he must have made it, right? I mean, if you see that the other possibilities are impossible in such a clear way, and you see someone who can do it, you'd say, this person did it. It's that simple. Now you look at the universe. You see something as amazing as a tree. You see the honeybee, you see this, you see that. On the other hand, there are mindless, unconscious atoms, laws, and whatnots. If you understand that none of them could have done it, you put them aside. Then, within the universe, there's nothing that can do it. There are atoms, the movements of atoms. I mean, you can't see anything in the universe that could create this art, this artistic being. There's nothing you can say, this did it. Then you would say, there is a necessary being outside of this universe, beyond the realm of contingency, and his power must be effective. I mean, logically, right? He's following a very good path. Since logically, there is no other way than these 4. If the first 3 ways are proven to be impossible, null, even worse than null, untenable, unfeasible, things that don't have the capability for you to say they can do this, if they are definitively proven to be unfeasible, then by necessity and self-evidently, the 4th way, the path of oneness, will be established without a doubt or suspicion. I mean, our master brings the issue to a level that is so in line with logical formulas, so suitable for the mind, that everyone can understand and see it easily. Right? In this respect, God willing. Now let's read the first absurdity of the first word. As for the first way, which is the formation of things and the existence of creatures through the coming together of the causes of the world, a fiction related to the idea that things are formed and creatures come into being through the coming together of the causes in the world, this is the first absurdity. Of its many absurdities, we will only mention three. First, in a pharmacy, there are hundreds of jars and bottles filled with very diverse substances. In a pharmacy, there are hundreds of jars and bottles filled with very diverse substances. I went to a pharmacy. There are jars on the shelves, hundreds of jars. Each one has a different substance in it, substances with different properties. We need to think of the pharmacy here as a pharmaceutical factory. It doesn't fit with today's pharmacies. Pharmacies now are just like markets. They only sell. This place should be thought of as a place of production. It used to be like that in the old days. In a pharmacy, there are hundreds of jars and bottles filled with very diverse substances. From those medicines, a living paste was requested, and also a life-giving, miraculous elixir needed to be made from them. We'll get to that. From those medicines, a living paste was requested, a living paste, and a life-giving, miraculous elixir, a medicine, needed to be made from them. We went to that pharmacy and saw many examples of that living paste and life-giving elixir. We needed the paste, we needed the medicine. We went to the pharmacy and saw the medicines we needed there. We examined each one of those pastes. We see that from each of those jars and bottles, with a special scale, with a particular precise measurement. For example, you know how it's written on medicines? Aspirin, or this or that. It says the active ingredient is, for instance, this much. It says there are 5 milligrams in each tablet, or thousandths. We saw the medicines made with those precise amounts. From each one, with a special scale, 1 or 2 dirhams of this, 3 or 4 dirhams of that, 6 or 7 dirhams of another, and so on. Parts in different amounts have been taken. For example, if a medicine is made from 10 different substances, for that medicine to be effective, if it requires 1 milligram from the first substance, 2 grams from the second, 3 grams from the third, we saw that it really contained those amounts. For instance, medicines today don't have 10 active ingredients like that. There's usually a single one. And they can't even get that right. Even though it's measured with such precise scales. For example, someone who worked at a pharmaceutical factory in Istanbul told me. He said they weigh it with such modern devices, with scales and all. So much medicine is produced. And still, he said, we look and the quantities are off. So it's destroyed, for example. If you attribute this to chance from the beginning, it means it would never happen, right? If 1 dirham more or less were taken from any one of them, that paste could not be living. It could not show its properties. We also examined that life-giving elixir. From each jar, a substance has been taken with a special scale, such that if an atom's amount more or less were taken, the elixir would lose its properties. For instance, when you're cooking, if you want to make a delicious meal, if you think like a chef, the oil, water, salt, tomato paste, all of it has a proportion, right? You have to add them in those proportions for the food to be food. When you miss the mark, it gets ruined. Even knowing that, you can't always get it right. Even when you use a measuring cup, you can't always get it right. If it were random, it would never work. The thing with these medicines is even more precise. The things in humans and animals are even more precise than that. From each jar, a substance has been taken with a special scale, such that if an atom's amount more or less were taken, the elixir would lose its properties. While there are more than 50 jars, from each one, different amounts of ingredients have been taken, as if taken with a separate scale for each. More than 50, I said 50. In each medicine, there are more than 50 substances, but each one is different. while there are more than 50 jars, from each one, different amounts of ingredients have been taken, as if taken with a separate scale for each. So to summarize, there are jars in the back, hundreds of them. There are substances A, B, C, D, all different. In the front, there are the medicines. We look at the medicines one by one. In each medicine, there are substances from each of those 50, hundreds of jars in different amounts. One has them in different proportions, another in different proportions, but very precisely. So precise that if 1 or 2 dirhams more or less, we're off for just one of them. Let's say it's taken from 50 jars, 49 are perfect, but from the 50th, you added a little too much. That medicine loses its property. They are such sensitive medicines. Now, how could these medicines have been formed from those jars to here? I mean, how could the substances in those jars have left the jars and combined into those medicines? Is there any possibility or probability at all that the different amounts taken from those bottles, through some strange coincidence or the tipping over of the bottles by a stormy wind? A storm came, the jars tipped over, the substances inside started to flow. From their tipping over, just the right amount flows from each one, that they go together and gather to form that paste. For example, 5 grams were needed from the first substance, it tipped over, and 5 grams came out. From the second substance, for example, 10 grams were needed, it tipped over, and 10 grams came out. 2 grams were needed from the third, 2 grams came out. Exactly the amount that was needed from each one came out. And for the other medicine, it's different. I mean, could it have happened like this? Randomly, by chance? Could there be anything more impossible, more superstitious, more absurd, more null than this? Now comes our sentence. If a donkey were to become doubly a donkey and then turn into a human, he would say, I wouldn't accept this idea, and run away. For instance, when describing donkeys, people say things like donkey-headed, right? When someone doesn't understand something, even a simple thing, you say donkey-headed. It's a common expression, isn't it? Donkey-headed. Now, when he becomes a double donkey, he's the symbol of incomprehension. Being double makes him even more uncomprehending. I mean, the guy understands nothing. He's so slow on the uptake, he just doesn't get it no matter what you tell him. Even such a donkey, he says, would understand how ridiculous this idea is and would immediately run away from it. Just in case this idea might infect him, he's saying, if you accept this idea, you're becoming more of a donkey than that donkey. Is he right? He's right. Is it an insult? No. If a donkey were to enter a state of double donnishness and then become a human, he would say, I wouldn't accept this idea, and run away. For example, when we would read this with high school students, we would give various examples. For instance, you're climbing a mountain. You're going along a narrow path on a cliff's edge. You have to be careful every moment, right? If you close your eyes for a second, if the wheel slips a little, you're down below. Let's say that road is 1 kilometer long. If you blink for a moment, close your eyes, you're down. You have to watch every moment. I mean, you have to be in control every second. The moment you let go of control for an instant, chance is control. I mean, what is chance? You leave it to its own devices, it moves randomly. The moment it moves randomly, it's over. Those people in that factory, even under so much control, they can't keep track of one thing. Chance gets in there and messes it up. This means that every moment, everything is progressing under the supervision and control of an absolute will. Just like this example, every living being is certainly a living paste, and every plant is like a life-giving elixir, which is composed of substances taken in very precise measures from numerous components and very diverse materials. Yes, let's read this part again. Just like this example, every living being, for instance, every living being, a sheep, a goat, and so on, every living thing is certainly a living paste, and every plant is like a life-giving elixir. For instance, plants, mint, thyme, chamomile, they are all medicinal, right? For example, you catch a cold, you drink some thyme tea, and God immediately gives you healing. You know, the herbs and plants we know are all medicine, all medicine. For example, if you compare the medicines in the pharmacy in the market with the medicines in God Almighty's pharmacy of the earth, the medicines in the earth's pharmacy are more wonderful, more precise, more perfect. The medicines from the market have side effects. They can cause harm. The plants we call medicinal herbs have no harm at all. I mean, if you consume too much, that's different. If you drink it in the right amount, there's no problem. Now, how can these medicinal plants come into being by chance? I mean, the medicines in the pharmacy and the market are coming into being by chance. And so many chemists, scientists, that are working, right? They come into being through experiments and so on. Now, the medicines in the pharmacy and the market don't form by chance. But the wonderful plants, medicinal herbs and so on in the pharmacy of the earth, they supposedly form on their own. How can there be such nonsense? If something like that were to happen, then every living thing wouldn't have the same perfection. Depending on the degree of chance, some would have no eyebrows, some no eyelashes, some no hair, but everyone has the same perfection. Yes, the same scent. Perfection. The art is at the peak of perfection. The point you made is also excellent. I mean, there's nothing ordinary. Everything is created at the most perfect level. Every plant is like a life-giving elixir, which is composed of substances taken in very precise measures from numerous components and very diverse materials. If it is attributed to causes and elements, and it is said that the causes created it, then just like the paste in the pharmacy coming into being from the tipping over of bottles, it is 100 times more far-fetched, impossible, and false than that. Just like the paste in the pharmacy coming into being from the tipping over of bottles, it is 100 times more far-fetched, impossible, and false. In short, in this great pharmacy of the universe, the life-giving materials taken with the scale of the pre-eternal decree and destiny of the all-wise pre-eternal one. I mean, God determines with his destiny, and he creates it with his decree. The life-giving materials taken with the scale of decree and destiny can only come into being with limitless wisdom, infinite knowledge, and an all-encompassing will. Limitless wisdom. I mean, nothing that God has created is useless, empty, or absurd. He has put wisdom, benefits, and purposes in everything. And also, infinite knowledge. What is the knowledge here? He knows, for instance, that those plants are created from the soil. They are created from those elements. He must know how they are created from those elements, from the soil. Also, for those created medicines and plants to be healing for the human body must also be known. They must be created in harmony with the human body. They must be created in a way that will produce healing in the human body. Such knowledge is needed, right? For example, the thing you eat, the medicine you drink, has to heal you in your body. Of course, in your body, for example, a man makes an engine that runs on gasoline. He makes an engine that runs on diesel, right? They have to be compatible. Now, if you put gasoline in a diesel engine, it breaks down. I mean, the thing that goes inside has to be accepted by it. It has to be suitable for it. Now, we drink medicinal herbs. For them to be digested inside us and be useful to the body, they must be created according to the human body. So the human body must be known, can only come into being with infinite knowledge and an all-encompassing will. So is there such knowledge, such a thing in causes, in chance? No. The wretched one who says it is the work of the blind, deaf, boundless, flood-like universal elements, natures and causes, is more foolish than a foolish, drunken, delirious madman who says that wondrous elixir came into being on its own from the tipping over of bottles. I mean, if a man were to say that the medicines in this pharmacy were formed this way, what would you call this man? You'd call him a delirious liar, because he's lying. No medicine is formed that way. For example, if these medicines were really formed like that, would anyone use them? If you were to say, hey, I mixed up some stuff and I made a medicine for you. Here, drink it. Without measuring or weighing, would you drink it? Is it poison? Who knows what it is? Here, drink it. So if it happened by chance, for example, they measure it, weigh it. It's monitored for 10, 20 years. And then, after all the side effects and everything are revealed, then you use it. Nothing like that has happened. It cannot happen. All the medicines, the ones sold in the pharmacy right now, the ones in the factory, are all made by measuring, weighing, and knowing their active properties. There is no medicine that was formed by chance. So if a person who says these things were formed by chance is a fool, a delirious person, and if he calls these things delirious and foolish, then how many times more foolish must one be to say that God's botanical and animal medicines on earth came into being on their own? Far more, because that is a more delicate art, a more perfect medicine, is more foolish than a foolish, drunken, delirious madman who says that wondrous elixir came into being on its own from the tipping over of bottles. You know, this is the most beautiful part of the RİSALE-İ Nur. He gives such an example that the example becomes like a bedrock, like a touchstone. Can you say that these medicines in this pharmacy were formed by chance like this? Can you or can't you? First, tell me that. He says you can't. Then you can't say the same for these botanical and animal medicines on earth at all. If you can't say that for the first, you can't say it for the second at all. Right? He makes you look at the issue beautifully. Yes, that disbelief is a foolish, drunken, madly delirious raving. What is disbelief? It is a raving. What does raving mean? A lie. For example, if I were to say this building came into being on its own, that's a lie. Is such a thing true? You'd say it's a lie? If I said the wind blew, this happened, that happened, then a storm came, and this thing appeared, that's also a lie. Isn't this statement a lie? It is a lie. So to say that this universe also came into being on its own, that everything happened like this on its own, that this and that happened, is also a lie. A foolish, yes, that disbelief is a foolish, drunken, madly delirious raving. Glory be to you. We have no knowledge except what you have taught us. Verily, it is you, the all-knowing, the all-wise.